15 years, blowing the doors off the competition. Podcasting to planet Earth.
PNRNetworks.com.
Now entering the PNR Networks arena, coming down the aisle from Revere, Massachusetts, weighing in at absolutely none of your business. It's the Mistress of Mayhem, the Queen of Quips. It's time for Ring Around the Rosie with your hostess, Kim Brown.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another week here on Ring Around the Rosie. I'm your host, Kim Brown, a.k.a. Platinum Rose Lady, coming to you on the 18th of July, 2021. I hope everyone is doing well and keeping safe, with the world still being a little bit crazy the way it is with all this COVID stuff out there still going on. If you have not gotten vaccinated yet, please get vaccinated. Please wear a mask if you don't feel comfortable. And just try and stay as safe as you can, considering, like I said, that the world is still a pretty crazy place. This week, I wanted to take some time to pay tribute to somebody that we lost, and it's it's always a sad thing to say goodbye. It's never easy, especially for people, their family and friends and people who knew them better, but when you're a wrestling fan, it's a very weird thing because you do feel like you know people. You see people for years and years and years, and you watch them as their career goes through highs and lows and everything in between, and you do feel like, if not that you know them, you feel like, wow, that's a familiar face on TV and stuff like that, or that you've seen live. And when they're gone, it's just that moment where you're like, wow. It's scary and sad, and you really wish you could be there for their family to say thank you, because this person, brought you joy as a fan. And we went through that this week as wrestling fans. Paul Orndorff passed away on July 12th of this year, 2021. He was 71 years old. Paul had started wrestling back in the in the mid 70s, 1976. He had kicked off his career in Mid-South Wrestling. Before he started wrestling, he had played college football at the University of Tampa, which is in Tampa, Florida, and he was a pretty good football player from what I've been able to see, considering the fact that he was inducted into the Tampa Athletic Hall of Fame in 1986, the University of Tampa Athletic Hall of Fame, so that's obviously a very prestigious thing. He was actually drafted by the New Orleans Saints in the 1973 NFL draft. He was drafted as a fullback. He wound up deciding to leave training camp for personal reasons, and decided that he was going to try out for professional wrestling. And that's what happened, and eventually. And he, like I mentioned, started wrestling in 1976, feuding at first with Jerry Lawler, and got his first title win against Jerry Lawler on June 7th of 1977, when he won the NWA Southern Heavyweight Championship from Jerry Lawler. And he was, usually in that area of the country, in the Mid-South and the southern states, and up through 1983. During which 1983 he came to work for the World Wrestling Federation, and made his debut there in November of 1983. He started kind of teaming off and on with Roddy Piper, and Piper became his manager. He had some tag team matches with Piper, and wound up becoming part of the the whole rock and wrestling connection deal, and wound up being part of the co-main event for the very first WrestleMania, which was the team of Hulk Hogan and Mr. T, who had Jimmy Superfly Snuka in their corner, taking on the team of Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff in the main event match. Bob Orton Jr. was in Piper and Orndorff's corner. The whole thing of the match, the end of the match was the heels attempting to do a cheap shot ending with Orton, whose arm was in a perpetual cast at the time, going to clock Hogan with the cast and wound up beaning Orndorff with it, and Hogan got the pin on Orndorff to win. After that happened was a face turn for Paul Orndorff for a little while. It didn't last all that long. It was it was pretty obvious that sooner or later he was going to turn heel again, and eventually he did. He had wound up wrestling in other places as well, including in World Championship Wrestling in the 90s. He had retired for a little bit in the late 80s, 1988. He was semi-retired, and he had suffered an arm injury while working in the WWF in 1988, and he was running a bowling alley actually in Fayetteville. Unfortunately, it's kind of ironic that we also went through another Paul is dead situation that didn't involve the Beatles, because during the time he had retired, there was a rumor floating around that actually made it into the newspapers, was that he had died. So, and he had to come out of retirement just to say, no, I'm not dead. That has to be a very weird feeling to have people call you or look in the paper and say, hey, did you know you died? And it's like, the hell? What? No, I didn't. But he wound up coming back into wrestling, although he did have some lingering issues because of the arm injury that he had sustained. His right arm had, there was constant problems with it because of nerve damage, because of the injury that he'd suffered previously in his right arm, and later on that would unfortunately continue, and he would wind up dealing with atrophy in the biceps of his right arm, which is obviously not a very good thing at all. He wound up coming back to wrestling in 1990, originally on the independent scene, coming back with a series of matches against Kerry Von Erich. He showed up in World Championship Wrestling in 1990, debuting on June 9th in 1990 in Beckley, West Virginia, and that was his in-ring debut. He wound up, at first he came in as a face, which I was like, okay, that's kind of strange. But it was very weird to see him as a face, although I'd seen him as a face previously. I always kind of felt like he worked better as a heel. I mean, that's just my own take on it for what it's worth. He had several, I think this is really interesting. He had several matches against Arn Anderson, who was the WCW TV champion. He also had a series of matches at house shows against a younger gentleman named Mean Mark Callis, who you might know as under a different name now. Obviously, the Mark went on to become The Undertaker, The Phenom, and all that. It's really weird because I look back on those matches now because I was into wrestling by that point, and I'm like, wow. It's boy, we all do change, don't we? But he wound up his final match in WCW at that time was in Chicago. It was on the 26th of August of that year. And he was in a tag team with Junkyard Dog going against the champions at the time, which was the team of Doom, which was Ron Simmons and Hacksaw Butch Reed. After that match, Orndorff wound up leaving WCW. He started working in other places, smaller federations. Smaller, some of them were smaller, but not through lack of trying. One of the places he worked was the UWF, Universal Wrestling Federation, run by Herb Abrams. And if you did not catch the Dark Side of the Ring episode about that federation and about Herb Abrams and all of the drama that ensued there, wow, did you miss something? But he was a member of that. He was a member of that organization for a while. He also wrestled in the American Wrestling Federation, which is different from... There was another place called the AWF, but it was not that one. And was also wrestling for the National Wrestling League, and that was in 1993. He went to work for Smoky Mountain Wrestling in 1992 for a little while. He didn't stay there terribly long, wound up leaving that organization and went back to WCW, where he was there for a little while from 92 to 93, where he was just working, solo and stuff like that. In 93, he wound up as part of a tag team, called Pretty Wonderful, which involved himself and Paul Roma, and because Paul Roma at the time was Pretty Paul Roma, and obviously he was still Mr. Wonderful, so we get Pretty Wonderful. It makes sense. I mean, it rolls off the tongue nicely. I remember kind of hearing the name first and kind of had that, dog hearing a strange noise, head tilt kind of reaction, but I was like, okay, well, I guess that works. They wound up feuding with the tag team champions, which were at the time Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan. And they had, several matches with them. They had several matches with the Nasty Boys. The team didn't last super duper long. It lasted, for a little while. I mean, as far as tag teams go, at least until 95. He had, many, many matches in WCW. He also had some programs in WCW that were, I don't like to do this because it's not Paul's fault by any stretch of the imagination, because goodness knows he didn't write this. Part of the storylines in WCW, he had lost his faith in his abilities as a wrestler because of some defeats that he had suffered in the ring, and specifically against Randy Savage. And he was just, dealing with a lot of self-doubt issues and wrestling with, where's my place in the world kind of deal. And he was visited by a gentleman named Gary Spivey. Mr. Spivey, if you have never seen Gary Spivey, he is, how do I put this without sounding terrible? I mean, the man found a way to make money and have a career, so can't really say anything about, terrible about that. He's a psychic, who has a look that is unique. We'll go with unique. And he became, Orndorff's psychic advisor, basically, kind of psyching him up and making him realize that yes, he really was Mr. Wonderful. And there was almost kind of a little bit of a narcissist gimmick about it, where he would Orndorff would carry around a mirror. It was a hand mirror. It was a little bit similar to the Lex Luger narcissist gimmick, but not exactly. It was close, but not enough that people would be like, hey. He wound up feuding with the Horsemen, the Four Horsemen, and because of a verbal spat that he got in with Brian Pillman on the episode of Nitro WCW Monday Nitro that occurred on the 11th of December 1995. This verbal confrontation between Orndorff and Pillman turned into a physical confrontation between Orndorff, Pillman, Arn Anderson, and Ric Flair, during which Orndorff got the actual hell beat out of him by both Flair and Anderson. This was used by WCW to explain that Orndorff had been very badly hurt and that he, the Horsemen beat him up so badly that his career was done. This was the kayfabe story. The actual real story is a lot sadder in the fact that Paul had to retire because the injuries that I mentioned previously in the WWF, where he had all these problems with his arm, the entire the right side of his body, it wasn't just his bicep anymore. It was the whole right side began to suffer from atrophy, and he was working through it and trying to deal with it as best as he could, but your body can only take so much. So he was forced to retire from the ring and started still working for WCW. I mean, thank goodness they didn't fire him by FedEx. I mean, what kind of shitheads would do something? Oh. Anyway, but that didn't happen this time. Paul was still working for WCW, working for them as a road agent and also working as a trainer. He did actually make a few more in-ring appearances, and one of them was on the 13th of December, 1999. He went up against the Harris twins in a handicap match, which I'm kind of, this is the point in WCW where it was very, very clear that the writing was on the wall, that this company was very, very obviously crashing and burning. He had an involvement in the 2000 Fall Brawl, and after that, he went to work for the Power Plant, the WCW training facility known as the Power Plant. And he did appear one more time with WCW in a team. They called themselves the Old Age Outlaws, which was the team of Arn Anderson, Terry Funk, and Larry Zbyszko. All three of those people I would not want to get involved in a fight, even if they were older, to battle with the NWO, because frickin' everybody had to battle with the NWO. After WCW folded, he did make a few more appearances involved in wrestling. He was inducted into the 2005 WWE Hall of Fame, and it was announced that he was going to be inducted, and he was inducted on April 2nd, inducted by Bobby Heenan. And he was also inducted in 2009 to the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, which was originally located in New York and is now located in Texas. He appeared at WrestleMania 30, which was actually the first time he'd been on WWE television since his appearance in the Hall of Fame ceremony in 2005. So that was 11 years later. He was there with he had a segment involving himself and Roddy Piper, along with Hulk Hogan and Mr. T. He made an appearance for the celebration ceremony that Raw had for Hulk Hogan's birthday, which was on the 11th of August of 2014, and he appeared on. In 2017, he appeared for a final time and for his final match, as it turned out, which was on May 3rd of 2017 as part of a Canadian Wrestling's Elite show, which was in Brandon, Manitoba, and he was still wrestling at 67 years old. And I'm sorry, I don't care who you are, that is impressive as hell. Unfortunately, wrestling is a very difficult profession. I mean, nobody who really watches wrestling and understands wrestling would ever say otherwise, and no fan who is a real fan of wrestling would ever argue that the amount of abuse that wrestlers put their bodies through is something that you have to be a very special person to be able to put up with all of the things that you do to yourself. Which unfortunately is one of the reasons that Paul Orndorff had to deal with, many medical issues throughout his life, including the atrophy to the side of his body that I mentioned, and also the fact that he apparently was suffering from dementia towards the end of his life. His son, Travis, had posted a video of Paul at a medical facility. And I gotta be honest, I mean, I can't picture how difficult that was for Travis to film and to decide to post. I can say from my own personal thing, it was hard to watch. I mean, it was very difficult to watch because you could tell, that Paul was not well, and you could tell he was really not long for this world, and that's obviously a very sad thing. As I mentioned, he passed away. Paul passed away on July 2nd of this year. He was an amazing person, and so he married his girlfriend that he had in high school, a woman named Rhonda. They wound up having 2 kids, Paul Orndorff III and Travis. He was a husband, he was a dad, he was a granddad. And, all I can say to those people is that I offer you my deepest sympathy, and I hope that wherever his spirit is now, I hope that he is free from pain and is clear of mind and heart now. And I hope that he is free of pain, in whatever is beyond this life. And I hope he finds peace. And I hope that his family knows that they were probably the most important thing to him, because he seemed like he was a very decent person. I never, you hear a lot of stories about wrestlers. You hear a lot of stories about, this guy tearing up a hotel room and that guy cheated on his wife and this guy had this, that, and the other thing. And I have to be honest, I never heard any stories like that about Paul Orndorff. The only story I do remember hearing about Paul Orndorff in that respect was him getting in a fight with Vader backstage at a WCW show, and that he and Vader had a very real physical confrontation, and that Paul wound up kicking Vader's butt, while wearing flip-flops. I don't know why, but the flip-flops thing really stuck in every story I saw about this. It was like, blah, 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 he kicked a guy's ass wearing flip-flops. I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, I can't understand why that is in there, because it is such a ludicrous little thing to throw in there, but it's also really impressive, simply because some of us can't walk down a flight of stairs in flip-flops without it turning into a disaster. You can't see me, totally raising my hand. But also just the idea of standing toe-to-toe with Vader and getting in an actual, real, honest-to-goodness fight with Leon White. No, thank you. Screw that. But he was a tough guy. He survived cancer. Paul had survived cancer at one point. He was a very strong person, but unfortunately, the strength that your body provides you, it can provide you that strength for a long time, but unfortunately, eventually, it does leave you, which is a sad thing. And I happened to see the video that his son put up, and it was sad. It's very sad to see someone that you were used to seeing on your TV as so full of life and strength and vitality, and you see them looking so lost and confused, and it's a very sorrowful thing, and it's very sad. And to his family and his friends and the people that knew him on the road, I offer nothing but my deepest and heartfelt sympathies. And I think that a lot of us would just pretty much agree that we may not have liked him in the ring, which means he was doing his job, because a lot of times he was a heel. But whether he was a face or a heel, he was always Mr. Wonderful. And I think whatever exists beyond this life, it got a little more wonderful after he joined it. So, I don't know what else to say. Just Godspeed, Paul. Godspeed to whatever's beyond this, and I hope it's more peaceful for you there. Okay, just kind of jumping forward a little bit to another issue Not issue like bad issue. Actually, it's a really good issue. AEW has a show coming up in New York, which they have, made a big deal about, which is obviously, it is a big deal. I mean, when you think about it, it is a very big deal that they are going to be performing a card in New York, because New York has traditionally been the WWE's territory. And the fact that, for the most part, from what I've heard, the tickets for the event are, if not close to sold out, if not very close to sold out, then close to sold out, which I think is great. I think it's awesome and amazing and definitely a good thing, which I think is the way that this sounds bad, but I'm going to say it this way because I don't know how else to say it, is the way people should feel. Wrestling fans should be able to look at the idea that an organization has gone somewhere new and is doing well with their ticket sales, and a wrestling fan should be able to look at that and say, wow, that's awesome news. That means more wrestlers have jobs. That means fans get to see something new. Isn't that great? Now, that's what would happen in a perfect world. Of course, in a perfect world, I would have Chris Hemsworth's phone number, and no, we're not doing that. Stalking is bad, okay? Chris, if you're out there, call me. But we don't get that from wrestling fans on this world, because all you get are, if you go online, which sometimes I honestly think that the internet was the worst thing that ever happened to wrestling, because it exposes the fact that some wrestling fans are just such toxic shitheads that are never happy. I have seen so many tweets and things like that from people being like, oh, I wonder how many of those tickets Tony Khan bought, blah, 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 blah. It's like, for crying out loud, people, could we stop with the divide? Could we please stop with the us versus them? I am not an AEW fan. I am not a WWE fan. I am a wrestling fan. Do I like some companies more than I like other companies? Yeah. Do I only like the other companies? No, not really. There are things about WWE I like. There are things about AEW I like. Right now, there are more things about AEW that I like than WWE, but between the two of them, I still like Game Changer even more than that. Although Game Changer doesn't have Jungle Boy anymore, so I don't like that as much. Sorry. Woman needs, don't judge. But for crying out loud. Now, I'm not saying that you have to like every single thing about wrestling. I'm not saying that everything is duckies and bunnies and unicorns and stuff like that. I'm not. I'm really not. But if you are someone that loves WWE and you only watch WWE, okay. I'm not going to say that makes you a bad person. If you're someone that watches only AEW, okay, I'm not going to say you're a bad person. But for people on both sides of that fence to be like, only my side is real wrestling and your side sucks and you're a bad person because you like them, grow up. I'm assuming that if you are old enough to have a Twitter account, you're old enough to act like an adult. Try it. For just once. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. For people to actively hope that a company goes under and that people go out of work, that's really shitty. Don't do that. Don't be that person. Try and be a better person in that respect. That's just my attitude for what it's worth. And if you think that I'm wrong, PlatinumRoselle@yahoo.com, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm a bitch. You can also tell me that I'm right and you think I have a gorgeous voice if you feel like you want to. But you don't have to. But I'd like to hear it. But I just feel like there's so many people that are like, well, my side is right and your side is wrong. There's no sides. It's all wrestling. That's just how I feel, for what it's worth. So that is going to wrap things up for the day, cats and kittens. I know that tonight is WWE Money in the Bank. I hope everybody who intends to watch enjoys. And if you have results you'd like to send along and your opinions of said, platinumroselle@yahoo.com, send them along to me if you like. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at platinumroselle@twitter.com. I also have a YouTube channel, Platinum Rose RolePlay. You can check that out as well. And also check out all of the crazy, wacky, fun things that me and my fella do on the interwebs. And you can check that out on our webpage. And I am going to be riding off into the sunset now, kiddos. This is Platinum Rose Lady, a.k.a. Kim Brown, signing off here on Ring Around the Rosie, reminding you to love the ones you hug the ones you love, and take some time to stop and smell the roses. I'll see you around. Bye.
You have been listening to Ring Around the Rosie with Kim Brown, a production of PNRNetworks. Keep in touch with all things about the show at http://ringaroundtherosie.net. Ring Around the Rosie intro performed by Eric Lyon. Ring Around the Rosie theme by Digital Juice. Join Kim for a new Ring Around the Rosie every Wednesday. Ring Around the Rosie is copyright 2018 PNRNetworks, Boston, Massachusetts, USA.
15 years, blowing the doors off the competition, podcasting to planet Earth.
PNRNetworks.com